These days, the Taliban are firmly in power, imposing their particular reign of terror from Kabul against all women, dissidents, and any minority group that does not fit perfectly into their dark and rigid world. Despite this, for years, they've been trying to gain international legitimacy. And suddenly, bam! Now the United States wants to return to Afghanistan. And no, this isn't clickbait. Nor have we gone mad. I'm completely serious. Check out this news item.
Trump says bad things will happen if Afghanistan does not return Bagram Air Base.
Yes, you heard correctly. Trump has asked, or rather demanded, that the Taliban return the Bagram Air Base, which was the largest US base during the time the Americans were in Afghanistan. At its peak, the United States had some 40,000 military personnel and civilian contractors at this facility. 40,000. So we're talking about a huge base. A base that now, suddenly, and completely unexpectedly, Trump says he wants back. Obviously, things aren't going to be that simple. The Taliban have already told the US president, no way, you're out, making it clear that if you leave, you lose your seat. And they left no doubt about it.
Taliban reject Trump's idea of retaking Bagram Air Base. Taliban army chief said in a speech in Kabul that the group will not negotiate away even an inch of our soil. That is something that is impossible and cannot happen.
But do you know what the craziest thing is? It was Donald Trump himself who agreed with the Taliban to withdraw the United States from Afghanistan. Take a look.
I'll be meeting personally with Taliban leaders in the not too distant future. And we'll be very much hoping that they will be doing what they say they're going to be doing. They will be killing terrorists. They will be killing some very bad people. They will keep that fight going. We've had tremendous success in Afghanistan in the killing of terrorists, but it's time, after all these years, to go and to bring our people back home.
A withdrawal that gave the green light to a state fully controlled by the Taliban. It was an agreement that, essentially, put in black and white, the defeat of the United States and its complete inability to establish a different political model in Afghanistan. Let me stress this. It was Trump who pushed for those agreements that ended US presence in this remote corner of the world. But now suddenly, as you can see, Washington wants to return. This forces us to ask a few questions. What's Trump really after with the push to get this base back? Why on earth does he want it? What could happen if the Taliban refused to give in and keep control of it? Would that actually be such a bad thing for the United States? Well, we're going to break down all of that and a whole lot more in this video, so pay close attention. But first, let me ask you this. Getting rich in 2025 is actually way simpler than most people think. You don't need years of experience or a degree that leaves you in debt. In fact, with AI, you can start earning in just a few weeks, whether it's landing a high-paying job or launching something of your own. And here's the reality. Nearly every job today demands AI skills. People who know how to use AI are 130% more likely to land better opportunities. But don't worry, I've got good news for you. This weekend, you can join the 2-day AI Mastermind workshop by Outskill, the world's first AI-focused education platform. In just 16 hours, with expert mentors, Outskill learners have already built and launched 100+ AI products with zero coding, many generating 4K to 5K in revenue. Normally, this program costs $895, but we've partnered with Outskill to give away 1,000 free seats exclusively to our viewers, only for the next 72 hours. That's nearly $900,000 worth of training, completely free. And by the way, it's rated 4.9 out of 5 on Trustpilot. Why does this workshop stand out? Short and effective. Just 16 hours. Great for busy schedules. Lifetime access to Outskill's exclusive AI community. 5,000 plus members. A seamless AI learning dashboard. Already trusted by 10 million plus learners worldwide. Over the next 2 days, you'll dive into prompt engineering, 10 plus powerful AI tools, automating your workflows, and building AI products without code. Also, if you sign up now, you get exclusive bonuses worth $5,100. A prompt Bible with 3,000 plus high-impact prompts on day 1. A roadmap to monetize AI on day 2. A personalized AI toolkit builder, only if you attend both days. So clear your weekend, Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. EST. Seats are limited and filling up fast. Grab yours through the link in the description. P.S. Join the WhatsApp group to stay updated before the big launch. And now, back to our topic.
The big turnaround.
The first question that must be answered is very clear. Why on earth is Trump now saying he wants to reclaim the Bagram airbase? Well, to understand this, the first thing we need to do is to find out exactly what this base is like, where it's located, and what it could be used for. You see, we're talking about a base located in the mountains, about 50 kilometers from Kabul. For Washington, it wasn't just another base, it was more like a fortified city with the capacity to house tens of thousands of soldiers. And it has 2 runways, the largest of which was almost 4 kilometers long. It could cater to everything from F-16 fighter jets to huge B-52 bombers. On top of that, the base had hangars, hospitals, repair shops, and even a small shopping center for military personnel. In fact, at the height of the war, Bagram came to be considered a little piece of the USA in Central Asia. It was the hub of the entire war effort. Drones taking off to carry out reconnaissance operations, fighter jets shooting off to attack targets, helicopters transporting troops to combat zones, and an intelligence center coordinating thousands of missions. And that's not all. Right next to it stood the Parwan Detention Center, the largest military prison in Afghanistan. A prison that was also transferred to the Taliban, and which, during the US presence, generated a lot of headlines for alleged serious abuses and some pretty harsh interrogations. Well, that's the base. But why does Trump want it back? Well, first of all, it seems like a terrible idea in general. Having a military base far away from everything, in the middle of a terrible place, dominated by hostile radicals, and with a terrorist presence, doesn't seem like the best idea in the world. Even more so when, in this place, in the 21st century, women live in conditions of slavery, and any social minority is massacred when it clashes with the religious principles of the government. Because, let's be honest, are you really going to look the other way in the face of so much terror? Are you going to allow continual human rights violations right under your nose? Wouldn't that make you an accomplice in the eyes of the world? Let's not pretend that places like Saudi Arabia or Djibouti are perfect, but a country in the hands of the Taliban, the optics are not good. Either way, if we set all these considerations aside, we can find a few compelling arguments to support the demand Donald Trump is now making. You know, give me back my base. And pay attention because I think these reasons are going to surprise you. So, without further ado, let's start with the first one. Yes, Bagram is close to Kabul, but it's not far from China either. It's less than 800 kilometers to the border between Afghanistan and China, where the Chinese province of Xinjiang is located.
This name might sound familiar because it's the province where the Uyghurs live, a Chinese ethnic group of Muslim faith that has been at the center of numerous accusations against Beijing for allegedly committing serious abuses in the region. Well, remember this name, Xinjiang, because it plays a key role in this whole story. China not only has the Uyghurs there, but also a huge desert.
I'm referring to the Taklamakan Desert, which is precisely where some of the country's most strategic and secret military installations are located. For example, some of the most important facilities in its nuclear program. Precisely the same program that Beijing has quietly been revitalizing in recent years.
China quietly rebuilds secretive base for nuclear tests.
VisualPolitik community, in this case, we're referring to the Lopner base, a place where China has been drilling deep wells and carrying out a lot of construction work in recent years. Well, this is a gigantic military base located in the far west of China, which, to give you an idea, is similar in size to the entire state of Virginia. And since 2017, this enclave has seen at least 30 new buildings renovated or constructed. Why? Well, no one knows for sure. But the Pentagon believes that China is already developing, or planning to develop soon, new and more sophisticated atomic weapons.
All the evidence points to China making preparations that would let it resume nuclear tests.
According to several military analysts, the activity at the Lopner base points directly to one thing. China is secretly developing a major plan to modernize and expand its nuclear arsenal. In fact, the Pentagon claims that last year, the People's Liberation Army increased its arsenal to more than 600 nuclear warheads. According to their estimates, this number will grow at a rate of 100 per year from 2023 onwards. Thus, Washington estimates that China will have 1,000 operational nuclear warheads by 2030 and 1,500 by 2035. Well, as I was saying a moment ago, everything points to this expansion of Beijing's nuclear power passing through Xinjiang one way or another. The alarm was raised when a former Pentagon geospatial intelligence analyst, one of those guys who spend their days analyzing satellite images, detected new structures in Lop Nur, including several deep boreholes and tunnels. And take note, because that former analyst is not alone. Many experts believe that China is indeed using these deep wells to conduct underground tests to rapidly improve its atomic arsenal. Nevertheless, although the construction and improvement of facilities in this area is fully confirmed, their actual purpose is still not 100% certain. But whatever the case may be, what does seem clear is that it is in this part of China, just on the other side of the vibrant cities of Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing, where the regime keeps its biggest secrets. And do you know what? From the Afghan base at Bagram to Lop Nur, American fighter jets would have less than an hour's flight time, which in military terms means it's just around the corner. And keep in mind, we're not just talking about nuclear weapons here. The Xinjiang Desert is also home to the main testing grounds for China's ballistic missile program. In fact, this is one of two places, the other is in the Gobi Desert, from which Beijing launches and tests its intercontinental missiles. But there's more. Xinjiang is not only a launch site, it's also a gigantic firing range where they carry out simulations of attacks against land and sea targets. And how do they simulate the sea in the middle of the desert? By placing life-size models of ships directly on the sand. And when we talk about ship models, we're talking about models that recreate the same aircraft carriers of the United States. Same size, same silhouette, a copy made to the millimeter. The objective, to adjust their weapons, analyze accuracy, possible errors, and a host of other factors in order to perfect their arsenal.
China has long built mock-ups of U.S. warships in the desert, likely to serve as targets. New images show an apparent USS Gerald R. Ford mock-up, indicating China is watching the Navy's newest carrier.
And the remains of some of these mock-ups are still abandoned in the desert and are even visible on Google Maps. What you are looking at now are images we've pulled from Google Maps. In them, you can see objects the shape and size of an aircraft carrier that appear to have been attacked by missiles. Of course, Washington is not amused, especially since both the missile launch and test site and the nuclear development facilities are practically off the US radar. They're too far from South Korea and Japan, two countries where Uncle Sam has bases with large radar systems capable of monitoring China's east coast, but not Xinjiang. That's too far inland. Now, what would happen if the United States were to regain control of the Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan? Well, then they would suddenly have one of Beijing's most strategic areas within their sights. They could monitor it more easily, and if necessary, keep it within range. And not only that, from Bagram, they could launch air operations and conventional missiles with sufficient range to attack Xinjiang, southern Russia, as well as crucial infrastructure of the New Silk Road Initiative. But hold on, because there's more. Okay, quick geography question. Do you know which countries Afghanistan borders? Come on, think for a second. 3, 2, 1. I'm sure many of you got it right. Afghanistan does indeed border Iran. And take note, this is no minor detail. In fact, it could be another reason why Trump is now considering returning to Afghanistan. Pay attention. As I said, Iran could also be playing a very important role in this desire of recovering the Afghan base. You see, the Persian country is already partially surrounded by US bases and allies: Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. But all of this is in the west. And in the east, well, in the east is Afghanistan. So with Bagram, Washington could gain an additional point of pressure on Iran's eastern border, which could greatly limit the Ayatollah's room for maneuver, because they would be virtually surrounded. Also, don't forget what I was saying a moment ago. The base is huge, and it has more than enough capacity to operate advanced fighter jets and bombers from it. In other words, it would be perfect for launching operations against Iranian military assets in the eastern half of the country. Of course, as well as the Chinese nuclear and ballistic facilities and the Iran issue, there are other reasons to consider this possible return. For instance, gaining greater control over the country's untapped minerals. Afghanistan is rich in lithium, copper, and iron, among many other minerals, although this potential is not currently being exploited. In fact, it's known, and we've told you, that both Russia and China are already trying to access the Afghan market to get their hands on these minerals.
Russian envoy sees Afghan mineral wealth as path to future cooperation. China, Afghanistan hold talks on mining, Belt and Road participation.
China is even considering bringing Taliban-controlled Afghanistan into the New Silk Road initiative to boost trade through Afghanistan, and in exchange, provide the Taliban with infrastructure to develop their economy to some extent. But naturally, a possible US presence in Bagram could curtail these movements to a certain extent, because, of course, those mining facilities would no longer be particularly strategic, and at the very least, they would be under control. Now wait a minute, because despite everything we're telling you, there is something we have to keep in mind. It's not that straightforward. I've said it before, if the United States were to return to Afghanistan and reclaim this base, the moral dilemma would be so great that this alone would make it practically unthinkable. Mind you, this is the other side of the story.
A difficult dilemma to swallow.
Let's be clear, Donald Trump loves to talk a lot, and his strategy is always the same. He barks a lot, but when it comes down to it, he doesn't bite, especially with despots and tyrants of all stripes. Rather than a strategic genius, some might say he's a marketing genius, and this matter will most likely remain just that. Another bluff. Why? Well, for starters, because in order to return to Afghanistan and recover the airbase, Trump would have to negotiate with the Taliban. Again. And here you have to keep in mind one crucial detail. When the famous, or rather infamous, US withdrawal from Afghanistan took place in 2021, it wasn't done just like that, but rather it was agreed upon in great detail when, how it would happen, and what would happen in the future. After almost 2 decades of war, the Trump administration and the Taliban signed the Doha Agreement in Doha, Qatar. A document that, in theory, opened the door to the end of the longest conflict in Washington's military history. So, what were the main points agreed upon? Mainly these 5. First, the withdrawal of troops. Washington committed to withdrawing all its soldiers and those of NATO within 14 months. Second, anti-terrorism guarantees. The Taliban committed to preventing Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, or other groups from using Afghanistan as a base to attack the United States and its allies. Third, intra-Afghan dialogue. The agreement stipulated that the Taliban would begin negotiations with the Afghan government to reach a political solution. This was, in theory, the key step toward achieving national reconciliation, which of course never happened, and Washington accepted. Fourth, the exchange of prisoners. Washington pressed Kabul to release up to 5,000 Taliban fighters in exchange for the release of 1,000 members of the Afghan security forces. And finally, the 5th point. Washington pledged not to use force against Afghanistan or interfere in its internal affairs. The problem. This is where the Bagram issue comes in. Washington reached an agreement with the Taliban because it was fed up with Afghanistan and wanted to leave as soon as possible. And now the Taliban flatly refused to hand the base back to the United States. So if the White House insists on getting it back, it could only choose between 2 paths. First, negotiate a new agreement from scratch. This would mean paying a price, either rent, trade concessions, or even greater international recognition. In other words, they would have to make the Taliban official partners of the United States. The second option would be force, but that is completely out of the question. Not even Trump would be crazy enough to risk getting involved in another war against the Taliban, let alone for the sake of a military base. Therefore, the most realistic alternative would be an agreed transfer, a handover of Bagram in perpetuity, or for a long period of time, which I insist would make the Taliban Washington's open partner. The problem, this would entail a series of moral dilemmas that even the United States might find difficult to bear. Because at the end of the day, we are talking about the Taliban. And since they returned to power in 2021, the rollback of rights against their population has been brutal. Women have gone from being judges, journalists, and civil servants to becoming second-class citizens, without access to secondary or university education, unable to work even for international NGOs, and in many cases, unable to leave their homes without a male guardian. Added to this is the repression of the press. Since the Taliban regained power, dozens of media outlets have been shut down. Many journalists have been arrested, beaten, and censored, and critical voices have virtually disappeared from the public sphere. Furthermore, religious and ethnic minorities, such as the Shiite Hazaras, have suffered constant attacks and systematic discrimination. And let's not get started about minorities based on sexual or religious identity. To make matters worse, there's also strong political repression in the country. In fact, many former Afghan government officials and members of the security forces who worked closely with the United States have been arrested, extrajudicially executed, or have simply disappeared. In short, calling calling the Taliban a security partner would be tantamount to turning a blind eye to a regime that rules through fear, censorship, and violence. Think about it carefully. Would the American soldiers deployed at this base be ordered to look the other way while all this is happening right under their noses? What position would this leave the United States in? As I said before, it doesn't sound good at all. And we mustn't forget that, ultimately, what Trump would be doing is re-involving the United States in a country they ended up completely fed up with. I don't think that would be a very popular idea among his supporters. We only have to remember how the withdrawal went to know that it's not a good idea to get involved in such a hornet's nest again. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball. Only time will tell what happens. But that being said, now the questions are for all of you. Do you think Trump is right to reclaim the Bagram base that the United States lost with its withdrawal? Do you think it's acceptable to make the Taliban strategic security partners in Washington's strategy to contain China and Iran? Or is this just another propaganda smokescreen? Leave us your comments and let's get the debate rolling. If you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't already done so, which is free and helps us out a lot. As always, thank you so very much for being there. All the best. I'll see you next time.